The adventure into the wonderful world of Disney continues, and today we've just seen a film that neither of us have actually seen, and that is Fantasia from 1940. There's really not much to say about plot with this film because there is no plot. It's essentially a 2 hour long music video, a series of music videos, really. Classical music paired with these beautiful, breathtaking pieces of animation for 2 hours. Aaron, what did you think of Walt Disney's Koyaanisqatsi?
Well, I think the difference between this movie and that movie is that there's more of a through line from start to finish. And this one's obviously broken up into many smaller chunks. And it really is a question of which chunks of the movie you like the best.
Yeah.
For me, I felt like the first half of this was just about as good as you could get, but then the second half really started to lose steam, and just wasn't anywhere near the level of the first half.
Would you agree that the first half of this movie is the most technically impressive Disney animation thus far?
Yeah, I would probably say so. I like this better when it's dealing more in abstraction.
Yes.
And when it's just kind of figures or kind of basic shapes or forms, kind of dancing around the screen. Like the entire Nutcracker suite was probably my favorite piece
I agree.
in the whole first half.
I really liked that. The fairies with the spider web and the dewdrops going down.
Yeah. The dewdrops especially. That was kind of my favorite little tiny section of the whole thing. It's just them when they got to the spider web and it's silhouetted and you can see the fairies flying around, and then they start to spray the dew on everything. It's oh man, this is just really visually captivating and matching the music very well.
There was a really cool visual I liked. It happened towards the end of that segment, I think it was, where these snowflakes appeared in the sky.
Oh yeah.
And then they materialized around the waist of these fairies and kind of looked like tutus.
Like tutus, yeah.
That's the stuff I like the most. And also, the first half of this movie is by far the more technically difficult animation because they're doing a lot more with color and lighting and shadowing, and it becomes a lot more basic in the second half when it's mostly flat colors. But
even
the first half,
even the first piece where it starts with just the orchestra and it's shadows with colored lights on the walls. Even that is more visually interesting and more well produced and just captivating to look at than some of the stuff in the second half.
Somewhat psychedelic.
Yeah.
In a way, phantasmagorical.
Yeah. What's the Sorcerer's Apprentice?
Yeah, that's kind of the turning point.
Well, yeah, I like that section a lot. I know a lot of people that could be their favorite one. The second half is when they start to get more into the story-based musicals, and this is where it really kind of falls apart because there really isn't much of a coherent story being told. You're just kind of watching animated animals doing dances, and I mean there's really not much to it.
The first half feels more like they're just trying to create these animated sequences that represent the images you see when you hear music.
Yeah.
And then the second half becomes more...
It's just they had some short films lying around and then they decided to slap some classical music on top of it.
Yeah.
The visuals and the music don't really go together very well in the second half, outside of probably the final piece.
Yeah, that's one of the segments that most people seem to favor, that Night on Bald Mountain / Ave Maria.
It does finish very strong, although I think the Ave Maria part of it was severely lacking.
Yeah, I can see that. It's just glowing orbs.
Yeah, it's very nice to look at, but I thought there would be a little bit more punch to it.
Yeah, but the Night on Bald Mountain is pretty sweet. The Chernabog creature.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite piece of animation in the whole thing. Just because of how fluid it is and the anatomy of the thing.
Simple but effective design.
Yeah, it's a very shadowy creature.
Yes.
And the way his wings kind of unfurl from the tip of the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And then he becomes part of the mountain by the end. really creative stuff.
Yeah, very beautiful lighting on him. But whenever I think of that creature, I mostly think of him when he's illuminated in the yellow and the green light. That's
Yes,
when he looks most intimidating.
the dinosaur segment and like the history of Earth, I thought was also a good segment.
I think that also started to lose me. I don't know what it was, but I think I like the Universal segment and the underwater segments, but
It's more abstract, like we were saying in the beginning.
but once it becomes about the actual dinosaurs, it started to get less impressive to me. Although I'll give them credit for showing all the dinosaurs die in drought and heat.
The worst section to me, or at least like the most tedious or boring, if you want to say, was definitely the Greek figures, like the Pegasus and the Zeus and all that.
I did notice I started to lose interest during that segment.
Yeah, when you and me were watching and started to kind of talk about stuff in conversation like that had nothing to do with the movie while it was playing, I was kind of feeling like, okay, we're starting to hit a turning point here where they're losing my interest.
That's about the worst thing that can happen during something like this.
Yeah.
I jokingly referred to this as Koyaanisqatsi earlier, but that was a film that had us like entranced the whole way through.
Yeah, and pretty much from start to finish.
We like our eyes were glued to the screen, our mouths were shut.
Yeah. It does get interesting towards the end when like Zeus appears, when he's throwing around his lightning bolts. But then it just kind of goes back to, well, I think the next one is the
Hippos and the alligators.
The alligators, yeah. I don't understand what the point of this one was.
Conceptually, that's one of the strangest segments in the film.
It's just like an alligator like trying to woo this hippopotamus.
Yeah, first he tries to eat her, then she
Yeah.
belly flops on him and crushes him.
Yeah.
Then he like is entranced.
There's some good visuals and good animation, but it just seems kind of like detached from the way the rest of the movie's been so far. Probably, I think a big mistake also is to keep like the interstitials with the host, where he's kind of like setting up the next piece. And this next piece is gonna be about it's gonna have this piece of music, and the story is about this thing. And I felt like it would have been more interesting if they didn't give you what the story, quote unquote, was supposed to be, and you just kind of had to interpret it yourself. So I'm just listening to this guy talk for like 2 or 3 minutes in between each song, and I'm like, I'd rather just get to the next piece rather than hear you tell me what it is about. Like, you're not leaving. It's like an experimental film, and you're kind of spelling everything out for me.
Maybe if Deems Taylor had just introduced the songs between segments and not told you what it's about, that would have been better. Because I don't mind them showing those segments because those scenes have the orchestra in it, and those people are critical, even though everybody except for Deems Taylor is in shadow.
Yeah, I wish they had cut those down and left more up to imagination.
Yeah.
For us to kind of interpret what they're about. And it also would have made the runtime a little bit shorter.
Yeah, I don't think this needed to be 2 hours.
Yeah, I think you shorten the stuff in between songs and you cut out the hippopotamus and the alligators segment, and then you've probably got a nice hour 40-minute movie.
We sound like a couple of Philistines dunking on this, because this thing is pretty revered. I don't think it's bad, it's just...
I don't either, but I also don't like it as much as I was hoping I would.
Yeah, I was really hoping this would be like the Disney equivalent to Koyaanisqatsi or 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, if this was 80 minutes, it'd be near perfect.
Probably. Well, there's still a Fantasia 2000. I think that one's like 70 to 80 minutes long. We're going to talk about Fantasia 2000, but that's going to take a while to get there.
Yeah, it's a couple decades later. How was this marketed back in the day? Like, was this aimed at children or adults?
I don't know how it was marketed, but I do know that Walt Disney wanted to resurface this film every few years, but replace one of the segments with something new. Which to me sounds like a kind of a terrible idea.
Why not just like do an entirely new edition?
Exactly. That seems to be the best thing that they could do, is just do every few years, crank out a new Fantasia. I'm sure there's no shortage of classical music to select from.
Yeah, I mean, or even like write original music for it, like they did for one of the pieces here.
True.
The whole time I was just thinking, like, man, I wonder how children feel about watching this. Like, it doesn't have to be made for kids, but I was also thinking, like, I can't help but feel like they would be so bored with this, especially children nowadays.
Yeah, I did think about that at several points throughout. I have no earthly clue. Having, like, no kids of my own and not really being around them, I have no idea. I would be inclined to think that they would be bored, but then I also remember I have seen Fantasia 2000. I saw that when it came out back in the day
Yeah.
on home video, and I do remember finding some of the segments in that film pretty arresting, and I felt the emotion of it pretty strongly, particularly the climax of that film, but we'll get to that when we view it. I don't even know if you remember that one too well.
Not particularly. I know it has a lot of celebrity cameos and like Whoopi Goldberg's in there. I think.
Yeah, it's a star-studded affair. Deems Taylor is long dead, so...
Yeah.
So, what is your final number grade on a scale of 1 to 10?
I would probably give it like the highest 6 out of 10 I could give it. The second half was just a kind of a bummer to me. It really brought the whole thing down.
Despite its shortcomings, I think I will give this an 8. What it sets out to do, it does succeed in pretty spectacularly. It just kind of loses steam a little bit here and there, particularly in the second half, but it finishes strong. Yeah, I would definitely recommend watching this, but I can definitely say with certainty that I won't be coming back to this with any frequency.
I would come back to like some of the segments and maybe watch, clips here and there, or just watch the first half and then the finale a few more times in the future, but I definitely wouldn't sit through this whole thing again.
Make your own Fantasia director's cut.
Yeah, there you go.
Since the scenes are segmented, it'll be very easy.
Yeah, very easy. I'll chop out that man's blathering and, cut out some of the segments I didn't like.
So yeah, watch Fantasia, and if you don't like what you see, make your own director's cut.
Yep.